Our opening prayer this morning is a poem entitled Covenant. And as I read it, remember the gospel we just heard. My child, I know it is difficult to love. I know it is difficult to forgive. I know it is difficult to suffer. But look, I am taking away your heart, and in its place, I am putting my heart. Now I will be loving in you. My heart is beating in you. Amen. This is a very interesting and at the same time difficult story to talk about. Last summer, on my long retreat, every year the three religious orders in Canada, that is the Sisters of St. John the Divine, the Communities of the Sisters of the Church, and my own community, the Order of the Holy Cross, do our long retreat together. And last year, our retreat conductor was Bishop Finching. And in addition to his one address per day, he formed an afternoon discussion group that dealt with his topic for the week, which is this gospel we just read. Each day, the 12 of us, only 12 decided we wanted to spend the afternoon together talking, hashed out our concerns that we saw that was presented to us in this parable about God's unconditional love, about what grace is, and how it worked or didn't work in this story. We chose sides. Some went with the traditional interpretation that this parable was about God's love and willingness to forgive despite it all. Others, like myself, felt that the older brother earned our sympathy because his cause was about justice and fairness. The father was in the middle, loving both his sons, and his decision to bring the son back into the family meant he lost the other son. We went back and forth. We ended up 7 days later, as Bishop Finching was trying to draw us into this whole looking at God's unconditional love, not without all of these concerns that we had about the story, because it is a difficult story. In fact, this story is quite provocative. And here are some of the issues that we raised in our group as we talked and hashed and sort of tried to discern what God was actually saying to us in this story. And then we realized there were several things. The first being the storyteller, in this case is Luke, does not begin by saying that the son repented, but only that he came to himself. This could imply that he experienced a deep life-changing realization that remade him completely, maybe. But it could also really imply that he did the math and realized that on his current trajectory, he would crash and burn in a short time. It's also clear from Luke's gospel that he papered over any kind of clue to the son's moral state at that point in time. The story tells us that the son says his father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare. This in the face of his own starvation. The son says and implies that the hired servants not only have enough bread, they have too much bread. He contrasts himself with mere hired servants and judges that it is not right that they should have more than he, as a beloved son, has. The younger son also contrasts himself with the servants. If he had contrasted himself with his older brother, the flavor of this story might have been very different. The contrast would be between his location and his brother's, between his choices and his brother's, and one might expect him to return home and try to live more like a son, and less, as one of the members in our group said, like a leech. The fact that he contrasts his situation with that of servants suggests that he believes his status entitles him to more food. Does this sound like a life-changing repentance? We are so used to focusing on the younger son, I realize, often identifying when he's taking off on his own, realizing he messed up and being overwhelmed by grace. It's a classic story of forgiveness and repentance. Actually, for me and for others in my group, I'm not so sure it is, as I can't tell whether he's actually repentant or just conning his old man one more time. I want to focus, however, on the other half of the story, the exchange between the father and his older son. I've often wondered if this parable sheds light on two very different reactions to grace. One, when you are totally down and out, to receive it with surprise and delight. The other, when you have been working hard and trying your best, can be rather resentful, as it seems like. It makes all of your efforts overlooked at best and perhaps even worthless. That's the older son. I think these two responses reflect two dimensions of ourselves. One dimension, that of the older son, reflects our life in the world and our need to keep track of things, to count, to make sure things add up, quantify, and to measure, and to compare and the like. And all this counting is not for our own sake, but is in the service of a larger goal, which is fairness. We track things not because we often need to, but to keep things fair, to make sure things are running right, and out of concern for equity. If the young son is finally a selfish manipulator, as some people think, and actually, and some scripture scholars also say the same, what will he do in the future? The storyteller leaves this crucial question without an answer. But what if all of these oddities that I have just mentioned are the key to the story itself? If they are the interpretive key to the story, then this well-loved scene is not a bland endorsement of hospitality and welcome, but an acknowledgement of the real risks that go with actual grace. That's what the bishop was trying to pull us into. We were going kicking and screaming. You follow what I mean? It even raises the question of whether grace is such a good idea after all. Deep in the heart of my theological marrow, I have a commitment to the notion that grace is a radical creative force that remakes even the deepest corruption. I find this notion comforting and preachable many times. But this strange little scene requires me to stop and wonder, requires me to notice that the father who says that his dead son is now alive has been wrong before. We do not know how this story turns out, which meant our 7-day argument was quite interesting because there is no solution even in the story. And I believe Luke intended it that way. So the question is the son remade or just reshoed, restored, and rested for his next caper? How do things turn out next week? We don't know, but we still have to ask. If all of these oddities are the key, then I find myself thinking not about the amazingly successful resolution to the scene, but about the risk with which it ends. Perhaps only grace could redeem the young son. Perhaps so. But it's also clear that we do not know that he is redeemed. As I said, the father, ever overly optimistic, has been wrong before. Perhaps this story shines its brightest light not on the beauty of a gracious but abstract theology, but on the unrepentantly real risks of life together. Welcoming the stranger into the home sometimes ends with a knife between the ribs. It just does. If you pretend that such things never happen, people who prefer fear and anger as motivators will win the arguments every time, and faithfulness will be left looking like a sentimental artifact of a charming childhood. Perhaps the point of this story is that the risks are as real as the love in the story. And then the point is that the love is indomitable, perhaps. Indomitable love might indeed recreate the world. And in that sense, it's a well-worth story to tell and play with over and over again because of the risks that are involved in our own lives and the ways in which we enter into relationships and the ways in which we dare to live with other people. You can see at the end of the 7 days, the 12 of us did not end it unanimously, but we were drawn in to this notion of grace as risk, to this notion of God's unconditional love, and also the ability to accept the risks that are involved with both of those things. Amen.